It all started on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of day that felt like it had no reason to be remembered. The neighborhood was calm, the air filled with the faint sounds of lawnmowers and distant barking dogs. It was the picture of suburban order, the kind of order that homeowners associations prided themselves on maintaining. But that order was about to collide with something deeply unreasonable. The homeowner at the center of this story thought nothing of where they parked their car. After all, it was their own driveway, a space paid for with their mortgage, their taxes, and their hard-earned sweat. Yet one small folded piece of paper taped to the windshield would change everything. At first glance, it looked like a friendly note, perhaps from a neighbor with a minor concern. But upon unfolding it, the tone was anything but friendly. The paper wasn't a neighborly message, it was a formal violation notice from the HOA. The accusation was straightforward but absurd. The car had been parked in the driveway overnight, and according to a newly enforced policy, this was a violation of community standards. The letter warned of fines, escalating penalties, and ultimately the towing of the vehicle if the rule was ignored. The shock was immediate. How could a car parked neatly, fully within the boundaries of a privately owned driveway, be considered a problem? The homeowner reread the notice several times, trying to find logic in the madness. The wording was official but strangely vague, relying on phrases like community standards and aesthetic uniformity. It was the kind of language meant to sound reasonable on the surface, but hollow underneath. Most importantly, it raised the glaring question, who decided that a driveway was not a place for a car? The rest of the day was spent in a haze of frustration and disbelief. Neighbors passed by with their usual nods and smiles, unaware of the notice taped to the windshield earlier that morning. But underneath that surface-level calm, resentment was brewing. By evening, the notice had been pinned to the fridge, a constant reminder of how powerless an individual could feel when confronted by an organization with authority. However baseless that authority might be, as the sun set, the first seeds of curiosity began to grow. Were others dealing with the same nonsense? Was this a targeted action or a blanket enforcement? It wasn't long before a casual conversation with a neighbor revealed the truth. Several residents had received similar notices in recent weeks, all demanding that their cars be kept inside their garages overnight. The HOA's justification was simple. Cars in driveways were unsightly and disrupted the community's curb appeal. The absurdity of it was maddening. Garages were for cars, yes, but they were also for storage, for workshops, for the clutter of suburban life that didn't belong inside the home. Many people used their garages for something other than vehicles, and no one had ever been bothered by it, until now. It became clear that the HOA, or at least certain members of the board, had decided to flex their power. That night, sleep was hard to come by. Thoughts kept circling back to that paper notice and the ridiculousness of the situation. The idea of paying fines, or worse, having a car towed from one's own driveway was infuriating. But beneath the anger, something else was forming. Resolve. If the HOA wanted to play games, they would meet resistance. No one was going to dictate how a homeowner used their own driveway, at least not without a fight. The next morning came with another surprise. A second notice had been slipped into the mailbox, this one bolder and sterner. It repeated the demand that the car not be parked in the driveway overnight and included a warning. Failure to comply will result in immediate towing at the owner's expense. The escalation was quick, almost aggressive, and it felt deliberate, as if someone on the board had made it their personal mission to target this household. Walking through the neighborhood, the homeowner began to notice small details that hadn't seemed important before. A board member's house where 3 cars sat comfortably in the driveway. Another home with a large RV parked for weeks without consequence. A clear pattern of selective enforcement began to emerge. The rules weren't being applied fairly. They were being used as a weapon, and the target had been chosen. By the end of the week, tension in the neighborhood had grown. Whispers of frustration passed between homeowners, each person afraid of becoming the next target of the HOA's overreach. Some neighbors shrugged it off, hoping compliance would make the problem disappear. Others quietly fumed, but few dared to push back. That hesitation only emboldened the board, making their actions bolder, their threats sharper, and then came the breaking point. On a quiet Saturday morning, the sound of a tow truck rumbled down the street. It pulled into a neighbor's driveway, chains rattling, metal groaning, as the operator prepared to haul away a perfectly parked car. The scene drew residents out of their homes, phones in hand, recording the absurdity. The car's owner protested, but the board had signed off on the order. The vehicle was lifted and taken, leaving behind stunned silence and simmering anger. That was the moment when everything changed. Watching that car disappear down the street confirmed the worst fears. The threat was not empty. The board was willing to go through with it, regardless of how unjust it was. For the homeowner at the center of this story, the message was crystal clear. If nothing was done, their car would be next. But instead of fear, a new emotion took root: determination. If the HOA thought they could bully and intimidate their way into controlling every aspect of life, they were mistaken. Plans began to form, ideas of resistance that went beyond simple defiance. This wasn't just about one car and one driveway anymore. This was about exposing hypocrisy, about standing up to abuse of power, and about turning the tables on those who believed they were untouchable. The notice on the fridge, once a symbol of frustration, now became a challenge. The HOA had drawn the battle line. It was time to prepare for war, and so, with the sound of that tow truck still fresh in memory, the stage was set. The next chapter in this fight would not be about compliance. It would be about strategy, evidence, and eventually, revenge.